I can relate a little bit. When I lived in Singapore, I bought a foldable bike. I thought it would be nice to just ride around the neighborhood, or maybe ride to the you can ride it to the train station or to the bus stop. And I started riding it. I was riding it to the park, and in the park, because it would get really hot on the bike. Singapore is on the equator. It will
Oh my
be
gosh.
sometimes, 37 degrees Celsius. Yeah, it'll be 100 degrees or more sometimes there, and it's really humid. It's almost 100% humidity.
How can
And
you even stand up? That
I
heat
I
hits
couldn't
you.
I would walk outside and just be immediately just drenched.
Yes.
Thought of riding the bike, it was hard, but I realized, well, you're walking slow and the sun's beating on you, and when you're riding, you actually might get less hot because you're moving faster. Although when I would ride it, I remember I rode it quite often. I'd ride it to the park in Bishan, which is where I lived, and in the park they had a bar, and I would go to the bar and I would order a beer,
A
and
bar in the
it
park.
would
Okay.
cool me off really nice. One time, the rain came down torrentially. It just started just pouring, and when it rains in Singapore, it rains. It's a
Okay.
tropical rainforest, so it rains, and you're not going out in it. And so, of course, on those days, I'd order another beer and
Why, of
wait out the
course.
storm. And then I'd ride my bike home, which wasn't very far. This is Singapore. And, but I tell you, getting on the bike again, even after the beer, by the time I would walk and get my bike undone, I'm so hot again. And I can't imagine being an outdoor athlete in Singapore. Maybe if you're doing a water sport, maybe, but they
Maybe.
have track and field there as well. And
Yes.
I just, oh, it's just awful. I know if you're born there, you're probably used to it a little bit
Oh,
better than
yes.
if you're born in Washington State. That's kind of a long, huge stretch from Singapore. Anyway, yeah, it was terrible. And, even in Singapore, this is weird too. They have air conditioning in every room except the bathroom. So you
Oh
go in
my.
the bathroom, the second you go in there, you're drenched and you feel like you need to change your clothes. Right? It was terrible.
Wow.
It's hot there. Anyway,
Maybe there isn't any air conditioning because they feel that you're not going to be in there that long.
I don't know what it is. I noticed it in every apartment I visited. They didn't have air conditioning. They did in the mall, the
Well, of
public
course.
places. Yeah,
Of course.
yeah, yeah. And they only had most of the places had only the ductless air conditioning, the kind that's hung on the wall, and it's separate for every room rather than central. There's not a
Yes.
huge, they don't use central air conditioning in most of the residential buildings in Singapore, which I found is a little strange because everyone in Singapore will buy air conditioners and hang them and have them installed. It seems more natural that you would have central air conditioning,
Yes.
especially if you're going to use it all year long. Here we have central heating, it's an essential. And where
Yes.
I stayed in China, the climate's like it is here, and I didn't have central heating. I had the wall,
Mm.
the kind of the air conditioner that hangs on the wall and puts out a really poor level of heat. Yeah.
Now, Deborah, what kind of work were you doing in China?
I was writing software code and
Oh,
doing also uh, testing, QA, quality assurance on the code.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
quality and assurance. Because when you
Yeah.
said QA, I was thinking questions and answers for software.
Oh, like
But
Q&A. Yeah. Yeah.
yes.
QA, quality assurance. That's where we make sure the software works as it's supposed to. I wasn't doing that directly. I was more of a overseeing consultant role. I worked
Okay.
between Singapore and China. So I lived in
Wow.
China and Singapore.
How long did you live in China and Singapore?
I I first went to Singapore in 2008, and then I stayed there about a year. I'd come home and then go back. And I went to China starting 2015, and I came back in 2016. So it was about a year this last time that I went.
Can you speak Chinese?
I was learning it when I was in China. I actually was learning it. I had this really great book. It's Learn Chinese with Mike, and I bought it in Singapore. And he has a channel on YouTube, and I would watch that with a supplement. And then I would go to China. Man, I would go home because I live really near the office. I'd go home at lunchtime and I would watch YouTube. When I was able to, I had to use a VPN, of course, because YouTube is blocked in China. So the application I'm using to learn Chinese isn't allowed in China.
Oh,
Yeah, which is just kind of funny. But but I did it that a little bit, and I tried speaking it a little bit. The big thing was at the office, it's not really practical. Without practice, you can't
oh,
just speak. It's so much easier to communicate in English to
okay.
my peers who spoke English. And because you have to be able to be fluent enough to have any kind of a conversation or understand what they're saying even. And in order to get to that point, I would need a lot more practice conversationally. I would have needed someone to practice with, maybe taken some classes. And I wasn't in China long enough to start all of that. I learned,
Okay.
it was an easy language to learn. I thought my biggest problem was lack of practice. Every now and then, well, there were several words that I did use regularly, like Zhao Sheng Hao and uh, whatever the word is now for takeaway. So I could say takeaway, chao fan, fried rice, uh, basic things like I wanted my coffee hot because if you can't just order coffee in China, you have to specify hot or cold.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, yeah. And I can't
How long did
remember
it
those
take
words.
you to realize that?
Oh, the first time you order it, they ask you hot or
Oh,
cold. Yeah, no matter where you go. And in Starbucks also. Starbucks, supposedly they're supposed to speak English, but they don't very well. Although
well,
it's really strange. When I was in Thailand, I went to McDonald's, and in McDonald's, everyone speaks really good English.
well,
Kind of funny. I didn't
that's a
expect
good
that.
tip to know.
Yeah, I mean, here it's like the bottom job you can get. You wouldn't expect to have an extra skill like that.
Hmm.
I
The
mean, if you're in Thailand.
the McDonald's in Thailand, what was on the menu that would be different from the
I don't
American?
remember. I do
Oh,
remember what was different in the Philippines. They
oh,
had a burger called the McDo,
McDough.
McDo, and it didn't taste good at all. To me, it tasted like the hamburgers they have at Jollibee, which is a Filipino fast food chain, very popular in the Philippines. They have one here in Seattle. They have one at South Center, uh,
Oh,
Westfield Mall, and they have things like spaghetti. They have different flavored spam for breakfast. They have hot dogs. They have hamburgers, and they have the hamburger. It tastes strange. I don't know what it is, but the McDo tasted about the same. I didn't like it. How when I was in Asia, one thing I did notice about, was it McDonald's or somewhere else? Another fast food restaurant, very similar, maybe. They had uh, hot, sweet hot chili sauce packets that you could dip your fries in. And they
Hmm.
had a nori mix that you could sprinkle on your fries. It tastes really good. I make my own now.
Oh,
I take the nori and I grind it up with sesame and other seasonings and pepper, and I sprinkle it on popcorn, on French fries. It's rice, mashed potatoes. It's a really
what
good.
is a nori?
Nori is seaweed. You get
Oh,
the sheets of seaweed that you would use to wrap sushi in, and you can grind them up. Uh, you can also buy these mixes pre-made. It's like a furiyaki mix. I think it's called something like that. And but I just make my own because I have all the ingredients. I have so many different spices in my house. I even have some I've had to order online to get because I used to do a lot of cooking, especially different cuisines from and trying to recreate dishes that I've enjoyed abroad.
oh,
And
sure.
yeah, now, I haven't been doing it as much lately. I just don't have the appetite anymore. But I'm hoping my appetite will come back one of these days and I will be able to enjoy these things again. But I still cook sometimes, and there's certain things that I do religiously, like make that seasoning.
Uh,
Everything. It's funny the things that you do when you travel abroad, how things that you change, such as I never liked tang. I'm still not a big fan, but when I was in China, my breakfast came with the orange juice and it was hot. It was tang essentially, but it was served hot because in China you can't mix it with water. It's not
oh,
safe. You have to boil the water first. And I think
oh,
that's why they don't use ice water and things like that, and why they
oh,
prefer hot, and just like hot milk too. They drink more milk. Only it's not cow's milk. It's like a hemp or soy milk or something like that.
oh my.
Yeah,
That's really interesting. Hot tang.
yeah.
I have not thought about tang for years because as a child, my mother brought tang and I was, oh goodness, because the astronauts drank tang. And who wouldn't want to drink what the astronauts drink? But to think about drinking it hot in a country because the water, you have to boil it first to get the bacteria, microorganisms out. And oh my goodness. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
I'm
interesting.
surprised that I actually liked it. Yeah. Even
Well,
so, it made me nervous to drink anything in China because I even had a steri pen to sanitize my water, which I did. I
oh,
had this big 1 liter cup that I would put water in, and I'd put the steri pen in there, and I would use that to brush my teeth. And um, it still bothered me if I had to drink it. I mean, I would boil the water and I would make coffee with it. Now, the big thing for me was these water is full of all kinds of toxins, not just living creatures. There are all kinds of
God.
toxic metals and chemicals and who knows what else is
Yes.
in there. And it made me uneasy drinking the water. And for all I know, that's what made me sick. I just don't know. It's just one of those things you don't want to buy. I bought bottled water for drinking, and I think I used it for coffee too.
Uh-huh.
I didn't use it for cooking. If I were to boil noodles, say, I would just use water from the sink. And it gets too much to buy all that water. If you have a water service, it works great, but I didn't have that and I wasn't about to. When I'm
Because I
only
was
there 2 months at a time, and then I go back to
uh-huh.
Singapore, then I'm back for 2 months. and I just never did that. And uh,
How expensive is water, bottled water, or a water service in China?
I'm not sure about the water service, and I don't remember about the water. I remember that there were certain brands of water that I avoided because I did my research onto what the safe ones were. It wasn't prohibitively expensive, but it wasn't cheap. It was probably maybe a little cheaper than it is here at the grocery store. It's not cheap here, which is
No.
strange because most of the bottled water you buy here comes right out of the faucet,
Yes.
which really it makes
Yes.
no sense. I don't know why people even buy it if that's what they want.
Of course, I drink water all the time. I have to stay hydrated. Like Marcus says, you have to stay hydrated. You have to keep up on the hydration. So I have been drinking water from the faucet. I do have bottled water. I do have it. But lately I've been drinking water out of the faucet. Marcus drinks water, bottled water all the time, and Gatorade.
Part of it has to do with how good your water tastes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I
I
know
know
as a
that. So when I was in Singapore, I always preferred the bottled water because the local water, it had a funny taste that I didn't like. And it would taste okay if it was cold, but as soon as
uh
it got room temperature, it tasted yucky. I just didn't like it. But here, I
oh
will just refill. If I get a bottle of water, like sometimes I'll get a bottle of water at Toastmasters, and when I come home, I just refill it and keep reusing that bottle for a few weeks.
oh, seems like Deborah, I became the interviewer for a while.
Well, it's a conversation, right?
Yes, yes, that's what
Yeah.
a conversation is. Um, you mentioned a pen, did you say a sterile pen?
SteriPen. It's a it sterilizes the water. It's a big, like a tall thing that you stick in the water
Uh-huh.
and you turn it on and it kills the bacteria. You can bring it
Wow,
camping. That's what I
I
bought
have
it for originally.
never heard of anything like that before.